Okay.
So, yeah. Hello, everyone. So, here we are at our week 5 of our Uncut Exception mini session. So, we will share
Yay.
what we do is share some technology stuff that we've learned over the past week and talk about it here within 10 minutes if possible, but it's okay to go over that. So, who's starting to share for this session?
It would be me.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so for this session, I will be sharing to you about Django Debug Toolbar. So, as I might have mentioned already in the previous session, especially the one where I explained about DRF and um, uh, DRF and authentication with DRF and Swagger, blah, blah. I am a Django developer primarily. And as a Django developer or more generally as a backend developer, it is important that when you write your code, you audit or you try to understand the performance of your code because um, unlike um, unlike say for example, if you compare it on the front end, normally what you see is what you get. Uh, Obviously, I'm not. There are other problems with front end, but in the back end environment, typically um, performance becomes very important because, for example, you're running on your local, your database only has, say, for example, 10, 20 records, but in production, you might have the table you're accessing might have 10, 20 million records. So what you think is fast while you are testing or debugging might not be fast when you deploy it in production. So you really have to keep in mind that in production, there's more data in your tables, and then your lists might be bigger, your sets might be bigger. There might be more objects stored in memory and that stuff. And then, so to determine those or to assess how bad or how good your code is, you need tools to use. So specific to Django, what most developers or what I personally use and our company uses is Django Debug Toolbar. So Django Debug Toolbar just displays a really nice um, sidebar on your Django application, and here it will tell you many things like, say, for example, your Django version, how much time it took to render this page, the CPU time, um, the different headers that you are sending in the response, your request object, uh, static files that you are loading in the page, your templates that you are rendering, and then the context used per template that you are rendering. So that is really sweet. And then some cache signals being emitted during the entire view process, uh, and many more logs stuff. Um, Me personally, I spend most of my time in here because it's the database queries that's really going to slow down your code or your page. So let's go to details later. First, I'll not show, but um, discuss how we get this set up. So first, you need to install Django Debug Toolbar, of course. You can just pip install Django Debug Toolbar. and then it will be ready to be used in the project. And then after that, after pip installing, you need to add Django Debug Toolbar in your installed apps. You need to be careful about this because Django Debug Toolbar, as you can see, displays um, a lot of sensitive information. For example, your actual SQL queries, which could be like reverse engineered to determine your table structure, the context used in the templates, which could contain, say, for example, I don't know, if you're a bad developer, your secret, secret keys. So who knows? So it renders a lot of sensitive information. So it's good to make sure that you only include Django Debug Toolbar if you're running on debug mode. So see here, if debug, we add Django Debug Toolbar. And then after adding it on installed apps, you also need to add it as a middleware. Again, we're doing the same thing. We check if it's on debug, and then we add Django Debug Toolbar as one of our middlewares. And then after that, you need to define this internal IP address, internal IP. So what the default behavior of Django Debug Toolbar is that it will only render if it is available. It will only render if the request is coming from like a specific IP. Um, and if you're running on localhost, of course, it's your home 127.0.0.1. So you need to add that there. But say for example, you want to use this in your um, staging environment. So one easy way to like not lose a lot of hair, trying to figure out why it's not showing, is just by overriding this show toolbar callback, wherein you can just specify a function that will be called that should return either true or false, whether to render that toolbar or not. It should like accept the request object, so you know you have access to who the user is, blah blah, IP, the refer, everything. But if you want to just always show it, just return true. This is not best practice, but it works. So it's good enough for the demo. So in my case, I'm overriding this show toolbar to always return true so that um, the sidebar is always displayed for me. So after doing all those, um, then you are good to go. When you run your Django server, you visit the page, then you will have your Django debug toolbar at the side. So let's look at some operations that uh, might interest you. So say for example here I have my rooms application running, my random rooms application running. So I have this table rooms and data. Um, Here I can see that um, count on the number of rooms is being called 2 times. So this is not good. It's being called by the Django's paginator class, and it's also being called, I guess, by one of the context to render the full count. Maybe it's this one that's calling it, and then the other one is the paginator, which we cannot see the pagination because it's less than, I think by default this renders 100 records. So, okay, no big deal. I don't want to override it because if we want to change that behavior, we'll have to change a lot of things. So, all good. Is there any other duplications here? Okay, no. So, yeah, typically what you will look for is these like duplicates. If you have duplicates, then you need to like reevaluate your code. If you could just cache something or store something on a variable instead of like running the query twice to get the value, that's good. You could also do select related. which is a common solution to duplicate queries. So as you can see in our rooms admin, I select related owner, so this is the user. If I comment this out, and then I refresh the page, it did not do anything. Okay, so the select related, I guess thus it shouldn't. Wait. Okay, I guess Django admin just does the select related by default nowadays. But normally, if you don't do select related, it will display like many duplicates in here, like select the user multiple times. Okay, that's SQL. Then one common thing that you typically encounter or will do when writing like a view in Django is that, say for example, here when I render the form, I can easily see the SQL queries here. And then I want to assess like how fast or what the queries are when you create a new record in the database. So if it's slow or not, then so I'll do that and then hit save and then click here. But you don't see the insert query. That is because in this view, when you submit the form, it will add the data to the database and then redirect to the list page. And then while you are already in the list page, it will only show the SQL queries run in the list page. So to solve that issue, um, what we need to do is to enable intercept redirect. So what this does is if the response is a 302 or a redirect, then it Django Debug Toolbar, instead of returning a 302, it will render a page containing a link to where it should redirect. So in that page, you will see the SQL queries run within the view. So as you can see, it's 302. If you want to go to where it should redirect, then you could just click this link. But if you want to assess the SQL queries in this page, then you will see the insertion. So you might be thinking that, okay, you should be creating only rooms, but you will realize that Django also creates logs in here. So it logs who uh, did what or who created what. So that is good. Um, yes, and and then another thing that I usually do on SQL is um, here we click explain so that you will know what SQL thinks about your query, if it's using any indices or not. If it's using indices, then that's good. If you use indices, it's faster. So we are seeing that it's using the primary key, so that's good. Okay, so next we will look into using Django Debug Toolbar with DRF. So normally, if you have like DRF, a lot of developers just use Postman to test the endpoint. Like say, for example, here I have an endpoint for listing rooms. So So that is this one, API slash room. And it should return a name and the UUID. So I send that. Okay, this is a post request. Let me do it again. Version basic. Okay. So here we get the response. So how do we um, how do we use debug toolbar for this endpoint? So what I do is just actually run this endpoint in the browser. So if you have Django REST framework in your project, you can actually visit the page directly here and then render an HTML. But if you did not put that in your installed apps here, if you forgot this, because this will still, I think, run. Yep, it still runs, even if REST framework is not in your installed apps. But this page will error because we cannot find the template to render. So the solution to that is this. So less catching of head to that problem. So yep, here we have the response, and then we also have Django Debug Toolbar here. Now we can see the SQL queries being run. So yep, your typical query on the session table to see who is the logged in user. And then here we can see that it's running a count on the number of rooms. So why is that? We look at our view list. Okay, so this probably is this line. So it's running a count to generate a random index. Okay, makes sense, acceptable. And then here, um, we are selecting room, offset 5, limit 1. So that's probably this line. Okay, acceptable. So that's how you assess your queries in an endpoint, or how I would do it at least. Then next is sending like a post request. So as we've seen before, there was issues with post request on admin, so we used intercept redirect. What if we do the same post request? If we do it in Postman, you won't see the debug toolbar. So we could also do it here. If we use HTML form, click post, and then inspect our SQL. Okay, good. So we have the part where we insert record to the database. The SQL looks like this. Makes sense. Probably not that slow. And then here we have like, what is this? There's a select query for the room name. Why is that? That probably is because our room has a unique constraint true on the name field. So that's how it checks if the name is already used. So, okay, acceptable. Okay, good. This really looks good. Then this approach typically works if you have a very well-defined endpoint, like here. Nothing crazy about this endpoint. We have a serializer, we have a query, and then we have view set. So what if you have like you override your, say for example, the create here, and then you get your data from request that data, and then manually, I don't know, you say name equals data that name, blah blah blah. So the point is, what if you are not using a serializer? You just you do it manually. Then if that is the case, this form will not be sufficient for you. The fields will not be here. So you will do is you just send like raw data and then application JSON. So if you do that, post, still we get the if it works, easy, post, and then it works. But the debug toolbar is gone. So this is a weird quirk on this page because if you actually use raw data, it will not reload the page. It will send an AJAX request. And then after receiving the response from the AJAX request, it will replace the entire HTML. So which really sucks because the debug toolbar doesn't work anymore for our favor. In our favor. So a workaround on this in this special edge case is it's very bad, but it works. So what I do in this case is I have this post request, and then I pass in the accept header text HTML so that I get the HTML response. So here you can actually the preview is bad. It has this preview works if like you are not using relative URLs. If these are absolute URLs, the preview will work. But that is not the point. So here you can see that there is a debug toolbar. It's just that we cannot render it. And this is the key value that we need to know, the store ID. So let's cheat a bit, reload this page, and then, okay, let's inspect network. So this is the cheat that I use if it doesn't work. So notice that debug toolbar sends an AJAX request to this URL. So you just open it in a new tab. Oh, voila. Here is the query. And then there is the store ID. So what if we make the same request again in our postman and then replace this ID. Okay, so this is how I do it. If I have a problem with the data, I mean, I cannot pass it through the HTML form, raw data. I do it through Postman and then copy the store ID, visit the URL myself, and then see the query here and the time. So I think explain even works. It just reloads. Okay, I guess that is it for my sharing. If you have any questions, ask them now or forever hold your peace. Questions?
Any questions? Questions, everyone? Or we should proceed to the next
That's cool.
sharer or presenter? What gonna? No, we need more people. So anyways, anyone, questions?
I don't have any. That's very helpful, Emma. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Eman.
Next speaker.
Thank you. So next speaker or presenter, that would be
That would be me.
Arnelle.
Hello.
Hello.
So Eman talked about a lot about backend stuff, profiling your Django app using Django Debug Toolbar. And in my case, we'll move back to the front end. So I'm going to share about a front end topic. Specifically, let me share my screen first. um, Specifically about web fonts.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I thought someone was calling me. Okay, so I'll be talking about web fonts. So we all know web fonts, right? We build websites, we render text, we make those texts look nice using custom fonts. So those fonts are served in the web, so they're web fonts. So defining web fonts, the all famous, oh sorry, the font face tag. This is how we can define custom web fonts in our CSS files. So a font face, we give it a name, which normally is just the name of the font, and we'll give some other extra CSS. So these ones, I mean font style and font weight, they are used as sort of to match the properties of your text. So for example, this means 400 is regular or normal. Is it normal? Yeah. So font weight normal, which is the not bold, not too thin. Font style normal, not italicized, not no other styles, just normal straight text. So and then you define your source, which is the URLs where your web font will be loaded from. So, no, so these are so you can define multiple sources, and they will be loaded like in order, and whichever matches first, or whichever is available first, whichever is supported by the browser first, that will be used. So for me, normally I try to use like the local source first in case like the browser that is visiting the website has the font installed on their browser, I mean on their device already. So you need to give it the name of the font as it is going to be installed in the device. So normally you can leave it out this, but just pointing it out. Then another one, after that, it's comma separated. You define the other sources through URLs. So give the URL, you give the path to the font file, and then you give the format. So there are a lot of web font formats on the web. There like WOF2, WOF, PDF, PLT, SVGs, so stuff like that. So first question that comes to mind is which font files should I use? So right now it's 2020. Browsers have progressed a lot already. You can usually, for most parts, I mean for most apps, you can get away with just using WOF2 and WOF. So Move, it's like it has a smaller file size than PPF fonts because of some compression stuff. Wolf2 is even better. It's better compression, smaller font size, but currently Wolf2 is not very widely supported yet, so it's good to have Wolf as a fallback. So I think if I remember correctly, Wolf and PPF have pretty much the same browser support, so you can just use Wolf if you want. And but if you're aiming to like really support a lot of browsers, even the old ones, maybe you need to have TTF as a fallback, oops, sorry, even EOP if you need to support IE, old versions of IE or SVG, if you need to support Safari or like old versions of Safari. But for the most part, you can just get away with both and both too. So that's it. And so let's talk about this font style and font weight first. So what this means is this font face will only be used if the text that's going to be rendered has normal font style and normal font weight. So for example, if you have a paragraph that is in bold, then obviously it doesn't match font weight normal. So this font file will not be downloaded by the browser. So that's how you can so with that you can define so many font faces in your CSS, but the browser will only load the ones that are needed by your page. And one last thing before we move on, font display. So font files they are served. The browser still needs to download them from the internet, right? So while waiting for the font files to be downloaded, um, depending on the browser, it can behave differently. Some browsers will really wait for the font to be downloaded. So it could take maybe like maybe very fast or very slow. And if it's very slow, the user will be stuck staring at nothing because the text won't display without the font. And so it depends on the browser. So font swap, make sure that, I mean, font display swap, make sure that when the text is there, um, the browser will only wait for a very short period of time. That depends on the browser. But it will automatically display the fallback font, which is in our case sans serif or whatever is the system default font. And once that, so it will display automatically display the fallback font as soon as possible. But once the font has been downloaded, it will just replace or like swap the font. So you will see that for a while, let's say you have very slow connection for a while, you can see the content right away. You can start reading the blog post, for example, right away. But once the font has been downloaded, it will just change automatically. So that's what font display swap is for. So let's take a look at our page. So if we replace this is HTML file, hello world. You can inspect, you can see in the tools what font is being used to render this specific text. I mean the text in this element. So currently it's using a local file because I have Inter installed on my device. But if I remove it, so just say I want that, we can see that it's loading Interfont as a network resource, or it had to download it over the network. So that's about fonts, font faces. One thing that I really want to show is, so you might be wondering, okay, PTF fonts are cool, WOW fonts are cool. What do they actually look like? So there's a really nice site that I use. There are a lot of tools like this, but I just keep going back to FontDrop that allows you to inspect font files. So far, I've only tried using PTF and WOW font formats. It doesn't support WOW 2 currently. And because I'm on a call and I'm streaming, my computer is very slow. So basically, okay, while waiting, let's just use this sample font. Basically, it will show you all the glyphs. Okay, page is not responsive. Wait, it will show you all the glyphs that are defined in your font. Um, you can do it. So let me just refresh. Okay. Anyway, we get the point. So after you uh, load your font file here, you can see all the glyphs. You will notice that there are really a lot of glyphs that are in our case we don't really use. So a lot of font files they try to support like a lot of languages, for example, like Chinese or Arabic characters, and some fonts like support those characters. But in our case, if you're building like English websites that's using Latin characters, you don't really need all those. And the thing is, all those glyphs contribute to the total size of the font file. So if you look at our example fonts, our PTF file, these three, they're all the exact same font, but the PTF version is 350 kilobytes. The WOF2 is smaller, it's around, I think, more than half smaller. So at 132, and the the WOF2 file is 90 kilobytes, but those contains all the unnecessary glyphs that we want. I mean that we don't want. So one um, technique or one approach we can do is we can actually remove the glyphs that we don't need. So there are a lot of tools out there that we can use. So okay, I have two that I've used before that I will just going to share. One is Subfont, and then one is Cliffhanger. They do pretty much the same thing. So they are NPM modules, so we can NPM install them as Subfont or Cliffhanger. I already did install them. So how do you use Subfont? So use Subfont by just passing your HTML file. So the nice thing with Subfont is it will automatically try to detect what characters, which glyphs are used by your HTML file. So here I'm only using hello world because these are not going to be rendered. So I'm only using hello world in the text. So if I run this, um, and if my laptop doesn't crash while doing that, so you can do it. Okay, so it will output some stuff. Okay, this doesn't usually take this long. My computer is just very slow. Uh, okay, while waiting for that to finish, uh, what else can we do? Okay, it's done. So here we see that it processed indexed HTML file using one font because we're only using one font, but it's able to detect all the font faces that are being loaded. And here it's able to know that, okay, out of all, so if you're using one font file called inter, one weight, which is 400 or the normal, and out of all the glyphs we're only using 8. Why 8 though? Let's check. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's correct. So, and as you can see, um, the WOF2 file, which was originally 92 kilobytes, it now became just 1 kilobyte. So now you don't need to download all the unnecessary stuff anymore. So one thing also that Subfont does is it will automatically like create a new CSS file that's loading all your font faces. It's minified, sorry. And here it will update your index.html to load that file. So let's try to serve this directory. So if I serve this, and okay, the port is being used because I have it here. Let's try again. So this, and if I refresh the page, you can see that it's only loading the smaller version of the font. So, and our text still looks complete. So to show that, to prove that it's actually a smaller font, we can add like a random character, let's say A, and B, C, okay, and refresh it. You see that it's not, oh, why is it being rendered? Okay, you see, it still looks like Inter because the fallback font is Inter. So bad example. But you see the idea. Hello world is is using the subsetted font, but ABC here is not part of the smaller font file. So the browser will try to download again the fallback fonts, which is as defined in our font family. It's inter. If the glyph is not in inter subset, it will fall back to inter. So that's why it downloaded inter. But normally that wouldn't happen. And okay, so that's inter. I'm just going to close this. And the next thing is so glyph hanger. So glyph hanger it does the same thing as subfont. It can subset, it can identify, I mean, it can subset your fonts, meaning you remove the glyphs that are not being used. It has a slightly different CLI, but it's the same. So you use it by um, with 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 GitHub. It's a bit different. You have to. I haven't tried if it can automatically detect all the fonts, but the way I've used it before, I have to specify which fonts I want to subset and which formats I want to subset them to, or like which output formats I need. And I can add a whitelist. So I can specify which glyphs do I need to be outputted. Let's just add this. And if you have an HTML file, you can also just pass your HTML file here. that will do the same thing as what subfont did earlier, where it will find all the characters or glyphs that are being used. But let's just try to whitelist specific characters. So again, this normally doesn't take this long, but okay. So as you can see, it's able to detect that, okay, these are the Unicode values that it needs to subset, and it's subsetting all the font files. So from one input font, since I specified here, from one input font, I specified, oops, sorry, I specified three output formats. So Cliffhanger will generate those three for me. So from 353 kilobytes, it's now 11 KB and 7 KB and 5 KB, respectively, depending um, on their web font format. And then the difference is Cliffhanger will just generate the subsetted fonts. I mean, based on how I've used them in the past. So I usually prefer Cliffhanger this way because I can control like where I put the file, where I put the fonts, how I load them, compared to some font where it just generates the subdirectory for you. But it depends on how you use them or and what you need. And in my case, to use this, and then I just need to update my CSS to point to the subsetted font files. So if I change it to this, and I serve the current directory, and I refresh the page, so you see, since I only subsetted the characters Arnelle Balane were soon. So the letters H, W, D are not included. So you can see that they look different because it's being rendered with the fallback font. And in the network tab, it's only downloading 6 kilobytes of font files instead of downloading 355 or something kilobytes. So that's subsetting. And if this works this time, we can actually let's try. One way to find out. Let's drag and drop from here. Let's just check the subset one. Okay, finally. So it's able to load. These are the different glyphs that are left after we remove all the others. There's this is one thing also that's different with glyph hammer that you might want to know. It's able to also keep like variations. I don't know that actual technical term, but variations of the glyphs that you want to keep. For example, I want to keep the small letter A, and it's able to keep like this version of the A or this A because I think it's able to, yeah, it just thinks that, okay, they're just, I want to keep them. Sometimes you don't want them, and I haven't found a way yet to ignore them. I'm sure there's just a cliffhanger option there, but with some font, it's really able to just extract the glyphs that you need. This won't be included, this won't be included. So that's one difference also. In a lot of cases, when, for example, you have a blog, you don't really know beforehand what texts are going to be rendered, right? But you're sure that you won't be rendering Chinese characters, for example. So um, you can just subset all the Latin or ASCII characters, but I don't remember how to do it. So in your whitelist, you can specify the special flag US ASCII. So let's do that. US, nope, nope, US ASCII, if I remember. So that will just extract like the common characters like the English alphabet and the numbers and the common symbols. So it's still smaller than all the glyphs that are available. So that's it. If you're like hosting your font files yourself, you're managing them yourself, and you can do it that way. And one more thing, just to end, if you are using Google Fonts, which is a very nice resource for fonts, for free fonts that you can just use very easily. Let's try Roboto. Um, Yeah, go. Let's try about let's see. We want to use the regular style, the embed. This is usually what you do, right? You just select the styles, you just copy the embed code, paste them in your HTML, and that's how you get your font. You can see Google Fonts already by default supports font display swap, so that will be included in the returns SS. But one more thing is you can actually add a text here. So it will Google Fonts will automatically subset this font based on the text that you provided. So that's it. If I save this, actually I don't I can test it. I can test this now, but this works. The font files that will be returned here is already subsetted based on these characters that you provided. And that's it about web fonts. Do you have any questions? Silence means no.
So, uh, can you also do that for like Graphicons? Does it
Ah,
also work, or is it a different tool? It's like Graphicons, you do classes like right, like I forgot what's used in the job, but yeah,
yes.
you know what I mean. Or is
Yes, the
it?
answer is that's actually one of the common use case for subsetting. Um, so with 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 icon libraries like let's say Font Awesome, Beautycon, there's usually two things there, right? You have the font file, the icon font, I think it's called an icon font, and then you also have the CSS with all the classes defined. So the optimizations you can do there is you can purge or like remove the classes that you don't need. So you can just keep the CSS classes that you need, and at the same time you can also just keep the glyphs the glyphs in the icon font that you are going to need. That's that that will take. I mean, that will require you to figure out which Unicode character is the specific font. That takes a lot of work. And I haven't tried it with some font or glyph yet, but it's definitely possible as long as you just provide the Unicode. Then glyph and some font will extract those for you. Yes.
I I'd like to ask a question. If that's okay.
Yes, correct. Correct.
Currently, right now, as you previously shown us, the process of subsetting is manual, but it will become tedious if you, uh, you're gonna do that every time you deploy
Mhm.
your project in production. So, are there any tools that you can use to, you know, automate the process? Because, yeah, as I said, it's
Yeah.
kind of tedious.
Yes. So usually, um, how I do it is I don't really subset it every time I build my project.
Yeah.
So as a starting point, I just subset the US ASCII characters using glyph. So I just have A, B, C up to Z, 0 to 9, the characters. So that takes my font files to like 30 kilobytes, 20 plus kilobytes already. And I just start from there. I just live with that. Normally, I just stay at that point. I don't really go farther. That's good enough already compared to like 300 kilobytes of font files. But if you really want to like squeeze out every bit of like unused stuff in your code, I think you can include it in your how do you call it, in your like build pipeline. So if you have like a CI CI CD na set up, some font or at least from what I've seen in their like docs, some font has the ability to like crawl all the pages. So in the example, I just passed index.html, but Subfont has an option called recursive, I think, where it will just crawl all the links, find all the text, and then subset your font based on all those clicks. So you can definitely do that. With yeah, Cliffhanger also has the same, but I'm not sure if it can crawl, but you can definitely pass URLs, for example. So there's that. And if you're using Google Fonts, you don't have to do anything. You just need to pass the text parameter. And if depending on your tools, I've seen that some font also has a plugin for Gatsby. I've never used it, but I think it integrates well when you build your like Gatsby site. Dorel would know this because he knows React and Gatsby stuff, but I haven't used it. But I just saw like when I was reading about some font, I saw that there's a Gatsby plugin, so I'm sure you can integrate it every time you build your Gatsby site. It will just subset your fonts automatically. So there are integrations like that. Um, yeah, that's pretty much all I know about integrations. So you can definitely check other things depending on like how you're hosting your site or how you're building and deploying it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so
So
much.
thank you for the question. Any other questions? So if none,
I don't have question on my.
we can close this episode.
So okay, so no question on my side. So I think that's it for tonight. So for tonight, I think we learned about Debug Toolbar, like a helpful tool for backend developers, and then discussed by Eman, and then we talked about web fonts, which is discussed by Arnelle. He talked about the subfont and glyph hanger. So this is it for tonight. It's more than 30 minutes. So I hope we see you again next week, Saturday. Dorel, balik ka. You have to go back.
Yeah,
Oy,
yeah. It's my turn.
share ka next week. Share
Yes.
next week.
The real speaking next